The emergency council chamber of the Galactic Federation buzzed with the frantic chittering, clicking, and harmonious tones of a dozen different alien species. Ambassador Zethkura of the Vorthak Empire stood at the central podium, her forearms gesturing wildly as she addressed the assembly. Her normally pristine blue scales were dulled with stress, and the bioluminescent patches along her neck flickered erratically. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying the weight of desperation that had brought them all here. "The Nexus Horde has broken through our final defensive line in the Outer Rim. 3 entire star systems have gone dark in the past 72 hours. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Nexus Horde had been a growing threat for decades, but their recent surge in aggression had caught everyone off guard. These weren't just raiders or pirates. They were a consuming force that left nothing but dead worlds in their wake." Ambassador Chu-Tilth of the Ethereal Communion raised his translucent, crystalline form. "Our psychic networks have been completely severed from those regions. The silence is absolute. It's as if those worlds never existed. The Galactic Federation had stood for over 2,000 years as a beacon of peace and cooperation among the stars. Formed after the devastating wars of the Burning Nebula, it had successfully mediated conflicts between hundreds of species and maintained stability across vast swaths of the galaxy. But the Nexus Horde was different. They didn't want territory or resources, they wanted complete annihilation." General Krextor of the Mandorian Defense Corps slammed his massive fist on the table, causing several smaller delegates to jump. "Our combined fleets have suffered 60% casualties. The Horde's technology adapts to everything we throw at them. They learn, they evolve, and they come back stronger. The scientific stations in the Perseus Arm have all gone silent," added Dr. Yilmasa, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Our best xenobiologists were studying the Horde's biomechanical integration there. If they've been captured or killed." Ambassador Zethkara's data pad chimed with another urgent update. Her expression grew even more grim as she read. "I've just received word that the Horde has broken through the Twilight Barrier. They're now 3 jumps away from the core worlds." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. The Twilight Barrier was supposed to be impregnable, a network of automated defense platforms, gravity mines, and quantum disruptors that had taken decades to construct. If the Horde had overcome it so quickly, nowhere in Federation space was truly safe. "How many worlds?" whispered Ambassador Felnara of the Aquatic Coalition, her gill slits fluttering with distress. "Preliminary reports suggest all of them," Zethkara replied. "The barrier didn't just fail, it was completely neutralized, as if the Horde knew exactly how to counter every system we had in place." The implications were staggering. Either the Federation had a massive security breach, or the Nexus Horde had developed technology so advanced that their defensive measures were useless. Neither possibility offered much comfort. Ambassador Chu-Tilth's crystalline form began to resonate with a low, mournful tone. "I have consulted with the eldest minds of our communion. They speak of an ancient prophecy dating back to the first age of galactic civilization. When the great devourer rises, when hope seems lost, the scattered children will call upon the forgotten warriors from the outer dark." Several delegates exchanged skeptical glances. The Ethereal Communion was known for their mystical beliefs, which often clashed with the more pragmatic approach favored by most Federation members. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Prophecies and legends won't stop plasma cannons and biomechanical assault troops, General Krextor growled. "We need real solutions." "Actually," interrupted a small, nervous voice from the back of the chamber. All eyes turned to Dr. Pipsqueak of the Rodentine Research Institute, a small, furry creature who rarely spoke up in council sessions. "There might be something to what Ambassador Chu-Tilth suggests. Not the prophecy part, but the idea of forgotten warriors." Dr. Pipsqueak activated a holographic display showing a star map of the galaxy. "My research team has been analyzing historical records, looking for any precedent for a threat like the Nexus Horde. We found something interesting in the deep archives." The hologram zoomed in on a small section of space near the galactic edge, highlighting a single yellow star. This system was marked in ancient navigation charts, but it's been largely ignored for the past several centuries. The inhabitants are listed as a developing species, pre-FTL technology, limited to their home system. Ambassador Zethkara frowned. How could a pre-FTL species help us against a threat that has defeated our most advanced technology? That's just it, Dr. Pipsqueak continued excitedly, his whiskers twitching. According to these old records, this species, they call themselves humans, has an unusual trait. Every time they faced extinction-level threats on their homeworld, they didn't just survive, they thrived. They turned every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into strength. One species, confined to a single star system. General Krextor snorted. Even if they have some useful tricks, their numbers would be insignificant compared to the Horde. Dr. Pipsqueak's tail flicked nervously. Actually, sir, that's where it gets interesting. The records indicate they achieved spaceflight capability about 50 standard years ago. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual energy signatures from their system. Massive industrial activity, fleet movements, terraforming operations on multiple worlds. He manipulated the hologram to show energy readings and spectral analyses. If these readings are accurate, they've gone from a single-world civilization to a multi-planetary industrial powerhouse in just 5 decades. That's unprecedented. Ambassador Felnara leaned forward, her aquatic suit bubbling softly. You're suggesting we contact this unknown species and ask for their help? We don't even know if they're hostile or friendly. The preliminary psychological profiles from the ancient surveys suggest they're highly tribal, but also capable of remarkable cooperation when faced with external threats, Dr. Pipsqueak explained. They have a strong protective instinct for what they consider their people, and an even stronger hatred for bullies and tyrants. The chamber erupted into heated discussion as delegates debated the wisdom of involving an unknown species in their crisis. Some argued it was too dangerous. What if the humans proved to be another threat? Others pointed out that they were already facing extinction, so additional risks were irrelevant. Ambassador Zethkara called for order. Dr. Pipsqueak, do you have any concrete evidence that these humans possess technology or capabilities that could make a difference against the Horde? The small scientist pulled up another display. There are some concerning gaps in our monitoring data. 3 times in the past 2 years, our deep space sensors detected massive gravitic distortions from the human system, the kind associated with either weapons testing or large-scale fleet movements. But when we tried to get more detailed scans, the signals were mysteriously blocked by what appeared to be sophisticated sensor jammers. Sensor jammers that can fool Federation technology? General Krextor's tone had shifted from skeptical to interested. Not just fool, completely nullify. Our best analysts couldn't even determine the source of the jamming. It was like the signals just disappeared. A new voice spoke up from the chamber's upper gallery. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why a supposedly primitive species needs such advanced countermeasures. All heads turned to see Admiral Vextra of the Void Walkers, an ancient and mysterious species that rarely involved themselves in Federation politics. Her ship-like form hovered silently above the assembly, powered by unknown technologies that predated even the Federation itself. Admiral, Ambassador Zethkara said respectfully, do you have information about these humans that we lack? Not information, Admiral Vextra replied, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber. But experience. My people have encountered species like this before, in the dark times before the Federation. Species that develop in isolation, under extreme pressure, without the cushion of galactic civilization to protect them. She paused, and the entire chamber waited in respectful silence. The Void Walkers were among the oldest known species in the galaxy, and their wisdom was legendary. Such species develop differently. They forge themselves in the fires of constant struggle. They become very good at war because war is all they have ever known. But, more importantly, they become very good at survival against impossible odds. Are you suggesting we should contact them? Asked Ambassador Chutilth. I am suggesting, Admiral Vextra said slowly, that if we are to die, we should at least give ourselves every chance to die fighting. And if there is any species in this galaxy that can teach us how to fight the seemingly unbeatable, it would be one that has spent its entire existence doing exactly that. The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone expected. By a margin of just 3 votes, the Galactic Federation Council authorized an emergency first contact mission to the human system. Ambassador Zeth Kara was chosen to lead the delegation, accompanied by a small diplomatic corps and a single escort vessel. As they prepared for departure, Dr. Pipsqueak approached the ambassador with a final piece of information. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "The humans have a phrase in their dominant languages that roughly translates to come and take them. It's apparently something they say when threatened with surrender." Ambassador Zeth Kara pondered this as her ship prepared for the hyperspace jump to Earth. She hoped they were making the right choice. The Federation had exhausted all conventional options against the Nexus Horde, and their enemies were closing in fast. If the humans couldn't help, or worse, if they proved hostile, it might be the final mistake the Federation ever made. But, as Admiral Vextra had said, they were already facing extinction. At least this way, they were facing it actively, seeking every possible advantage rather than simply waiting for the end. The hyperspace jump engaged, and the Federation's desperate gamble began its journey toward a small, blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Behind them, the Nexus Horde continued its relentless advance, consuming everything in its path as it moved inexorably toward the heart of galactic civilization. In the depths of space, automated warning buoys transmitted their final messages before being overwhelmed and destroyed. The Horde was adapting again, becoming stronger, more efficient. Time was running out, and the Federation's last hope rested with a species they knew almost nothing about, a species that, unbeknownst to them, had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone could have imagined. The bridge of the Federation diplomatic vessel Harmony's voice hummed with nervous energy as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Ambassador Zeth Kara stood before the main view screen, her forearms clasped behind her back as she studied the tactical display showing the positions of various objects throughout the system. "Sensors are picking up massive industrial activity," reported Communications Officer Yilnet, her tentacles dancing across the control interfaces. "I'm reading energy signatures from at least 12 different planetary bodies, including several that the old surveys indicated were barren rocks." Captain Mordeth, a grizzled veteran of several first contact missions, frowned at his displays. This level of development in just 50 years? It should be impossible. Even the most aggressive expansion programs we've seen took centuries to achieve this kind of system-wide infrastructure. The view screen shifted to show a detailed scan of the third planet from the star, Earth. What they saw defied expectations. The planet buzzed with orbital installations, massive space elevators stretching into the void, and a constant stream of traffic between the surface and various space-based facilities. "Ambassador," called out Science Officer Dr. Keltmar, "I'm detecting some very unusual readings from the outer planets. These appear to be artificial modifications, extensive ones." The display shifted to show Mars, which glowed with the distinctive signature of active terraforming operations. Massive atmospheric processors worked around the clock, while the planet's surface showed signs of extensive colonization and industrial development. "They're terraforming an entire world," Ambassador Zeth Kara murmured. "The energy requirements alone." "Ambassador," interrupted Lieutenant Zixandra from the communications station, "were being scanned. Multiple sources, using technologies I don't recognize. The scans are incredibly sophisticated. They're not just detecting our presence, they're analyzing our ship's composition, crew complement, and technological capabilities." Captain Mordeth's expression grew tense. "Any signs of weapons lock?" "Negative, sir. But the scanning intensity suggests they have sensor technology that rivals our own, possibly exceeds it." Ambassador Zeth Kara made her decision. "Open a communication channel on all standard frequencies. It's time to announce ourselves." As the communication system activated, the bridge crew held their breath. First contact with a new species was always unpredictable, but the evidence of human technological advancement suggested this would be unlike any previous encounter. "This is Ambassador Zeth Kara of the Galactic Federation diplomatic vessel Harmony's voice," she began, her voice carrying across space toward the blue world below. "We come in peace, seeking dialogue with the representatives of your species. We have urgent matters to discuss that affect the safety of all intelligent life in this galaxy." For several minutes, there was only silence. Then, the communications array crackled to life with a response that surprised everyone on the bridge. Federation Vessel Harmony's voice. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Command. We have been monitoring your approach since you entered our system. Please adjust your heading to coordinates 127.4 by 89.7 and prepare for escort by our vessels to Luna Station. A diplomatic team is being assembled to meet with you. The casual efficiency of the response caught the Federation crew off guard. There was no surprise, no confusion, no lengthy debates about how to respond to alien contact. It was as if the humans had been expecting them. Admiral Chun, Ambassador Zethkara replied, "We appreciate your prompt response. However, we must stress the urgent nature of our visit. The galaxy faces an extinction-level threat, and time is of critical importance." Understood, Ambassador. Our intelligence networks have been tracking the Nexus Horde's advance for some time. We'll discuss this matter in detail once you arrive at Luna Station. Your escort is en route. Captain Mordeth exchanged glances with his crew. Intelligence networks? How could they possibly know about the Horde? Before anyone could speculate further, the ship's proximity alarms activated. 3 vessels had appeared seemingly from nowhere, taking up escort positions around Harmony's voice. The Federation crew stared in amazement at ships unlike anything they had ever seen. The escort vessels were sleek, angular, and somehow menacing despite their obvious peaceful intent. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested incredibly advanced propulsion systems, and their hull configurations included features that the Federation sensors couldn't identify. "Those ships," whispered Dr. Keltmar, "they're using some kind of stealth technology. Our sensors didn't detect them until they chose to reveal themselves." "How long were they there?" Captain Mordeth demanded. "Unknown, sir. They could have been shadowing us since we entered the system." Ambassador Zethkara felt a chill run down her spine. If the humans possessed stealth technology that could fool Federation sensors, what other capabilities might they be hiding? The journey to Luna Station took less than an hour, but it provided ample opportunity for the Federation crew to observe human space infrastructure. What they saw was staggering in its scope and sophistication. Earth's moon had been transformed into a massive military and industrial complex. Enormous shipyards stretched across the lunar surface and into space, where the skeletal frameworks of ships under construction created a forest of metal and energy. The scales were mind-boggling. Some of the vessels under construction were larger than anything in the Federation fleet. "Ambassador," Dr. Keltmar called out, his voice filled with awe, "I'm reading power signatures that suggest these ships are using fusion reactors the size of small cities. The energy output is incredible. And look at the construction rate," added Yilnet. "They're building these massive vessels on multiple production lines simultaneously. The industrial capacity required." Captain Mordeth shook his head in disbelief. 50 years ago, they were confined to a single planet. How is any of this possible? As they docked at Luna Station, Ambassador Zethkara prepared herself for what might be the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history. The scale of human achievement suggested they possessed resources and capabilities that could indeed make a difference against the Nexus Horde, but it also raised troubling questions about their intentions and long-term goals. The docking bay was a marvel of efficiency, with automated systems that guided their ship into position with precision. As the delegation disembarked, they were greeted by a sight that would have been impossible just decades earlier. Hundreds of humans in advanced spacesuits working on various projects, their movements coordinated with military precision. Admiral Chun was waiting for them in the station's main conference room. She was a woman of middle years with graying hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her uniform was practical rather than ceremonial, and she carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. "Ambassador Zethkara," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome to Luna Station. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Admiral Chun," the ambassador replied, accepting the handshake while marveling at the human's calm demeanor. "Your species' development has been remarkable. We had no idea you had achieved such advancement." Admiral Chun smiled grimly. "We've had good reason to accelerate our progress. Please, have a seat. I believe we have much to discuss." As the delegation settled around the conference table, Admiral Chen activated a holographic display that showed the current galactic situation. The ambassador was shocked to see that the human intelligence on the Nexus Horde was not only current, but, in some cases, more detailed than the Federation's own intelligence. As you can see, Admiral Chen began, we've been monitoring the Horde's advance for the past 18 months. Our deep space reconnaissance assets have been tracking their movements and analyzing their capabilities. Deep space reconnaissance assets. Ambassador Zethkara repeated. You've been conducting covert operations outside your system? Among other things, Admiral Chen confirmed. When we achieved faster-than-light capability, our first priority was understanding our galactic neighborhood. We discovered the Federation's existence fairly quickly, but we also discovered the threat you were facing. Dr. Pipsqueak, who had accompanied the diplomatic mission, leaned forward eagerly. But why didn't you make contact sooner? The Federation has protocols for integrating developing species. Admiral Chen's expression became slightly harder. Because we weren't sure we could trust you to make the hard decisions necessary to survive what was coming. Galactic civilization, from what we observed, had grown soft over 2 millennia of peace. The Federation's responses to the Horde have been inadequate. The blunt assessment stung, but Ambassador Zethkara had to admit there was truth to it. So you've been preparing for war while we've been trying diplomacy. We've been preparing for survival, Admiral Chen corrected. War is simply one aspect of that preparation. The Nexus Horde represents an existential threat not just to individual species, but to the concept of intelligent life itself. Conventional responses have proven insufficient. She manipulated the holographic display to show detailed analyses of Horde technology and tactics. They're not just conquerors, they're a force of entropy made manifest. They don't want to rule or exploit, they want to erase. Everything they touch becomes part of their collective, losing all individual identity and purpose. Which brings us to why you're here, Admiral Chen continued. The Federation has exhausted its conventional military options. Your combined fleets have taken 60% casualties, your defensive barriers have been breached, and the Horde is now advancing toward your core systems. You need a game-changer. Ambassador Zethkara nodded slowly. Dr. Pipsqueak's research suggested that humanity might possess unique capabilities that could help us. Are we correct in this assumption? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh her words carefully. Humanity has certain advantages that developed during our evolutionary history. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us constantly. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate changes, and eventually our own tendency toward warfare. We learned to be very good at pattern recognition, adaptation, and, most importantly, we learned that sometimes survival requires doing things that seem impossible. She stood and walked to a viewport that showed the ongoing construction in the Luna shipyards. When we realized what the Horde represented, we didn't just build ships and weapons. We rebuilt our entire civilization around the principle of directed evolution, not biological evolution, but technological and tactical evolution at an accelerated pace. Every human colony, every industrial facility, every military unit is designed around rapid adaptation and improvement. We don't just build weapons, we build systems that build better weapons. We don't train soldiers, we create warriors who can learn and adapt faster than any enemy can evolve. Dr. Keltmar spoke up hesitantly. The energy readings we detected, you've militarized your entire star system. Not just militarized, Admiral Chen confirmed. We've turned our entire civilization into a weapon designed specifically to counter threats like the Nexus Horde. Every human colony, every asteroid mining operation, every scientific research station can be converted to military production within hours. She returned to the table and activated another display. This is what we're prepared to offer the Federation. Not just ships and soldiers, but an entirely different approach to warfare. The Horde adapts to conventional tactics because conventional tactics are predictable. But human warfare has always been based on unpredictability, on doing things that seem impossible or insane. Ambassador Zethkara studied the tactical projections on the display. They showed fleet movements and battle strategies that defied conventional wisdom, Yet the mathematical models suggested they would be devastatingly effective against Horde forces. There is one condition, Admiral Chen added, her voice taking on a steely edge. If humanity commits to this war, we do it our way. No Federation oversight, no committee decisions, no diplomatic constraints. We'll coordinate with your forces, but human military units operate under human command with human rules of engagement. The implications were staggering. Admiral Chen was essentially asking the Federation to give an unknown species carte blanche to wage war however they saw fit. Admiral, Ambassador Zeth Kara said carefully, what you're describing sounds almost like total war, Admiral Chen finished. Because that's exactly what it is. The Horde doesn't recognize rules of engagement or civilian targets. They consume everything. The only way to fight an enemy like that is to become something they can't consume, something that adapts faster than they do, something that fights dirty, and something that never, ever gives up. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't just offering to help fight the Nexus Horde. They were offering to transform the nature of the conflict itself. How soon can your forces be ready to deploy? Ambassador Zeth Kara asked finally. Admiral Chen smiled for the first time since the meeting began, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Ambassador, our forces have been ready for deployment since the day we learned about the Horde. The question isn't how soon we can be ready. It's how soon you want us to begin. 3 weeks after the Federation's desperate embassy to Earth, the strategic situation had deteriorated beyond anyone's worst projections. The Nexus Horde had smashed through 2 more defensive lines, consuming the industrial heartlands of the Vorthak Empire, and leaving nothing but dead space in their wake. Refugee fleets filled the space lanes, carrying survivors from a dozen different species toward the inner core systems. Admiral Krextor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Retribution's hammer, watching the tactical displays with growing despair. His combined fleet of nearly 3,000 vessels from a dozen different species represented the largest military force the Federation had ever assembled. It should have been more than enough to stop any conventional enemy. But the Nexus Horde was far from conventional. Status report, he growled to his tactical officer. The Horde has established a forward staging area in the Kepler Nebula, reported Commander Yextau, her voice tight with strain. Intelligence estimates suggest they're massing nearly 10,000 vessels for a final push toward the core systems. 10,000, Admiral Krextor repeated grimly. Against our 3,000. And their ships regenerate damage while ours don't. It was the Horde's most terrifying capability. Their biomechanical vessels could literally heal from damage by consuming local space debris and even the wreckage of destroyed ships. In previous engagements, Federation forces had watched in horror as Horde vessels they thought they had destroyed simply rebuilt themselves and rejoined the battle. Any word from the human delegation? Asked Captain Velnara, commanding officer of the Ethereal Communion's contribution to the fleet. Admiral Chen's last communication indicated their forces would arrive within 48 hours, Admiral Krextor replied. Though I'm beginning to question whether even human assistance will be sufficient at this point. The weeks since first contact had been filled with frantic preparation. Human military advisors had arrived at Federation command centers, sharing tactical information and combat doctrines that were unlike anything in galactic military history. Their approach to warfare was aggressive, adaptive, and frankly disturbing to species accustomed to more civilized forms of conflict. But results were what mattered now, not comfort levels. Admiral, called out the communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from the edge of the system. It's Admiral Chen. Put her through. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main view screen, and Admiral Krextor was struck by how different she looked from their previous communications. Her uniform was now clearly combat gear, and her expression carried the focused intensity of someone heading into battle. Admiral Krextor, she said without preamble, this is Admiral Chen aboard the UES Defiant. The first human expeditionary force has arrived in system and is moving to join your fleet. Admiral Chen, what's your force composition? How many ships are you bringing? There was a slight pause before Admiral Chen replied. That's complicated. I think it would be easier to show you. Permission to transmit fleet composition data? Granted. What appeared on the tactical displays made every sentient being on the bridge stop what they were doing and stare. The human fleet wasn't arriving in the neat, organized formations typical of Federation military doctrine. Instead, it was emerging from hyperspace in a pattern that defied conventional tactical thinking. The first wave consisted of vessels that looked more like mobile factories than warships. Massive, blocky ships bristling with manufacturing equipment and material processors. Behind them came the actual warships, sleek, predatory-looking vessels that moved with an organic fluidity that was almost unsettling to watch. But it was the scale that truly staggered the Federation officers. The human fleet numbered over 15,000 vessels, ranging from small, fast attack craft to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Federation fleet. 15,000 ships, whispered Commander Yextal. How did they build so many vessels in such a short time? Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of pride. We didn't build them all in the last 3 weeks. We built the capability to build them. Every ship in our fleet can manufacture additional vessels using available materials. We've been in constant production mode since entering the system. Admiral Krextor struggled to process the implications. You're saying your ships can reproduce? In a manner of speaking. Our manufacturing vessels can break down asteroids, space debris, even destroyed ships, and convert the materials into new vessels. We learned the principle from studying horde tactics, but we refined it. The tactical displays updated as the human fleet settled into position around the Federation forces. Their formation was unlike anything in military textbooks. Instead of neat battle lines, they formed a complex three-dimensional pattern that seemed to shift and flow like a living organism. Admiral Chun, Admiral Krextor said, I have to ask, what exactly are we looking at here? Some of these energy readings don't match any known propulsion systems. You're looking at 50 years of human innovation applied specifically to the problem of fighting an enemy like the Nexus Horde, Admiral Chen replied. We studied every battle, every defeat, every tactical failure. Then, we designed ships and weapons specifically to counter their advantages. She manipulated her own displays, and the Federation fleet received detailed technical specifications that made their science officers gasp in amazement. Our ships don't just carry weapons, Admiral Chen explained. They carry adaptive manufacturing systems, tactical evolution computers, and, most importantly, they carry humans who have been training for this specific fight since childhood. Admiral Krextor noticed something else on the tactical displays. Admiral, I'm reading some very unusual energy signatures from your ships. Almost like quantum tunneling drives, Admiral Chen confirmed. We can phase our ships partially out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to hit while maintaining full offensive capability. It's based on theoretical work your own scientists published decades ago, but never successfully implemented. Commander Yextal looked up from her console with an expression of awe and concern. Admiral Chun, the power requirements for that technology should be astronomical. How are you generating sufficient energy? We solved the power problem by rethinking what constitutes a power source, Admiral Chen replied. Instead of traditional fusion reactors, our ships use controlled micro-black holes. Each vessel essentially carries its own miniature star. The implications were staggering. Humanity had achieved technological breakthroughs that the Federation had considered theoretical impossibilities. But, more than that, they had weaponized these breakthroughs and built an entire fleet around them in less than 50 years. Admiral Krextor said carefully, I have to ask, why didn't humanity seek Federation membership? With technology like this, you could have led the galactic community. Admiral Chen's expression became somber. Because galactic community was a luxury we couldn't afford. While your species were enjoying peace and prosperity, we were facing the reality that threats like the Nexus Horde were inevitable. We chose survival over comfort. The conversation was interrupted by urgent alarms throughout the Federation fleet. Long-range sensors had detected movement in the Kepler Nebula. The Nexus Horde was beginning their final advance. All ships, this is Admiral Krextor, he broadcasted to the combined fleet. The enemy is moving. All vessels prepare for battle. Admiral Chun interjected. With your permission, I'd like to suggest a different approach. I'm listening. Don't prepare for battle. Prepare for war. There's a difference. Admiral Chin's tactical plan was unlike anything the Federation had ever attempted. Instead of meeting the Horde in a conventional fleet engagement, the human strategy called for a multi-layered defense that would draw the enemy into a carefully orchestrated trap. The first phase involved the human manufacturing vessels, which had spent the past several hours converting captured asteroids into automated weapons platforms. These weren't traditional defense stations. They were adaptive weapon systems that could reconfigure themselves based on enemy responses. The Horde learns from each engagement, Admiral Chun explained as the fleet moved into position. So we're going to teach them the wrong lessons. Every platform they destroy will transmit false tactical data to their collective consciousness. By the time they reach our main fleet, they'll be expecting threats that don't exist and missing the ones that do. The second phase involved something the Federation had never seen: disposable warships. Human manufacturing vessels had produced hundreds of single-use attack craft loaded with experimental weapons designed to test Horde defensive capabilities. We're going to throw everything at them that might work, Admiral Chin said. Antimatter charges, quantum disruptor beams, temporal mines, gravity bombs, even some weapons we developed specifically for this engagement. Most won't be effective, but the few that work will tell us how to hurt them. Admiral Krextor watched in fascination as the human fleet prepared for battle with a methodical efficiency that bordered on the mechanical. Every ship had a specific role, every weapon system had been tested and calibrated, every crew member had trained for scenarios specifically based on Horde tactics. Admiral Chun, he said, your people seem remarkably calm for a species facing its first galactic-scale conflict. This isn't our first galactic-scale conflict, she replied. It's our first conflict with an alien enemy. We've been fighting wars of extinction for our entire history. The scale is different, but the principle is the same. Adapt faster than your enemy, hit harder than they expect, and never stop until one of you is completely destroyed. The Nexus Horde emerged from the Kepler Nebula like a tide of darkness made manifest. Their biomechanical ships moved in perfect synchronization, their hulls rippling with organic surfaces that could heal from damage in real time. They had learned from previous engagements, adapting their formations to counter traditional Federation tactics. But humanity had never used traditional tactics. The first wave of human weapons struck the Horde fleet with devastating effect, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of trying to destroy Horde ships, the weapons were designed to confuse and misdirect them. False sensor ghosts made individual Horde vessels target empty space, while quantum interference patterns disrupted their communication networks. Phase 1 is working perfectly, Admiral Chin reported. The Horde is adapting to threats that aren't there while ignoring the real danger. The real danger came from the human manufacturing vessels, which had been quietly producing something unprecedented, weapons that could evolve in real time. As Horde ships adapted their defenses, the human weapons adapted faster, creating an arms race that favored whoever could innovate more quickly. Admiral, Commander Yextao called out. The human vessels are doing something impossible. They're modifying their weapons mid-battle, creating new configurations faster than the Horde can adapt. Admiral Krextor watched in awe as human ships literally rebuilt their weapon systems during combat, testing new approaches and discarding ineffective ones within minutes. It was like watching natural selection accelerated to an impossible degree. How are they doing this? He asked. Human thinking, Admiral Chun replied simply. We don't just build tools. We build tools that build better tools. Every human ship has a tactical AI that can design, test, and implement new weapon configurations in real time. The Horde can adapt to any specific threat, but they can't adapt to threats that are constantly changing. The battle raged for hours, but gradually the tide began to turn. The Nexus Horde, for the first time since their emergence, found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't simply overwhelm or out-adapt. Every time they developed a counter to human tactics, those tactics had already evolved into something new. But the most shocking moment came when the human fleet revealed its final surprise. As Horde reinforcements arrived from deeper space, human ships began to coordinate in a way that defied understanding. They moved as if controlled by a single mind, but Admiral Chin's communications made it clear that wasn't the case. Every human crew is making independent decisions, she explained, but We're all working from the same tactical philosophy. We call it emergent coordination, individual creativity leading to collective effectiveness. Admiral Krextor realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity hadn't just brought superior technology to the fight, they had brought a completely different approach to warfare, one that turned the Horde's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. As the last Horde vessels retreated deeper into space, their formation broken and their adaptation capabilities overwhelmed, Admiral Chin's final transmission carried a promise that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Krextor, this is just the beginning. The Horde will regroup and try again, but they've shown us their limitations. Now we hunt them down and end this threat permanently. Humanity doesn't just fight to survive, we fight to win.